Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another daily dose of Dominaria spoilers. And as we enter into week number 2 of official spoiler season, in like week 3.5 or something, since we started the slow trickle and whatnot, maybe a month since the leaks at this point, we have quite a bit to talk about today. I believe it's our last mythic, but we do have one mythic today, some interesting rares, some powerful uncommons. So let's jump right into it, starting with our one mythic for today, Multani, Yavmaya's Avatar. And this card might look like a big dumb green creature, but I think it's actually pretty powerful. So for 6 mana, you get a 0/0. Off to a good start. 6 mana, 0/0. However, it gets +1/+1 for each land you control and each land in your graveyard. Also has reach and trample, and it comes back from your graveyard. You can pay 1 and a green, bounce 2 lands back to your hand, and return it from your graveyard to your hand. So hard to kill, really big, lots of keywords. This is a callback, sort of, to Multani Marrow Sorcerer, which had another sort of similar ability. Actually, the original Multani was really bad. It was 6 mana, you got a star, which is kind of like a 0/0. Power and toughness equal to the total number of cards in all players' hand, and had like a shroud type ability. So you can see kind of the reference to the old version. It plays somewhat similarly, except the new version of Multani is way, way more powerful. So the first thing I thought of with this card was Everhand Hydra. You got the 6 mana, kind of a 6/6. The way Multani scales is, assuming you don't have any lands in your graveyard, you get 6 lands, you cast it, you get a 6/6 reach trample for 6 mana, which already isn't a horrible idea. Of course, you lose a land tutoring ability, but you get a lot of other upside. So the other thing about Multani is it can potentially just be the scariest card in the world if you're playing ways to get lands into your graveyard. Strategic Plannings, Benefaction of Ronas, Minister of Inquiries. If you're dumping a lot of cards into your graveyard, once you get down that Multani, there's a reasonable chance it's going to be like a 15/15 trample or a 20/20 trample. It can be super, super huge, super, super quickly. And because it has trample, it's actually a legitimate way to end the game. It's not going to just get chump block into oblivion. So there's a pretty reasonable chance if you build some sort of like Multani dredge style deck. And remember, the other benefit of this is you can always get the Multani back from your graveyard. So if you mill it over with your Minister, your Benefaction, or your Strategic Planning, you can always get it back later by bouncing those lands. So you're going to be able to find it consistently. And then you just have this huge game-ending threat. You even have World Shaper if you want to go really deep, milling stuff over, eventually getting all those lands back, which are still going to benefit Multani because it counts lands on the battlefield as well. And then you can even just like fling it at your opponent's face. It seems possible to get this to be a 20/20, fling it at your opponent's face, win the game. Of course, the other thing is, since it has trample, you don't necessarily need fling. That's what really makes the card for me. If it didn't have trample, I would think this card was pretty much just not playable in standard. Sure, it's big, but it's just going to get chump blocked by servo tokens and all that stuff for infinity. But since it has trample, I could definitely see this showing up as a build around where it's just so big, and if your opponent doesn't have the Vraska's Contempt, doesn't have the cast out right away, this is going to just trample over and win the game. And if they have lesser removal to deal with it that doesn't exile it permanently, you can always just keep getting it back, so you can ramp into it quickly. It's going to be super huge. If you can get lands in your graveyard, it's a bonus. So for some reason, I'm more excited about Multani Yavmaya Avatar than I thought I would be. I actually think this card could have a shot as a super sweet build around in standard. Moving from the land of the mythics to the land of the rares, we have a land in Cabal Stronghold. So Cabal Stronghold, kind of a callback to Cabal Coffers, a very fixed version of Cabal Coffers. So you get a land, it taps for a colorless, then you can pay 3 and tap it, and you add a black mana for each basic swamp you control. Cabal Coffers, of course, has a downside that it doesn't just tap for mana, but you can tap it to add a mana for each swamp you control. So the reason that this is so fixed is kind of twofold. First off, Cabal Stronghold only cares about basic swamps. Cabal Coffers is down with any swamp, which means you can play dual lands like Blood Crypt. Also means you can just play an Urborg, which turns Cabal Coffers into a swamp, so it counts towards itself, along with all your other lands, and just make like tons and tons of mana. So I feel like Cabal Stronghold is an extremely safe version of Cabal Coffers. And if you think about how this plays, it actually doesn't really make extra mana until the late game. So if you have 4 swamps and a Cabal Stronghold, you're essentially tapping for the same amount of mana you would if you just tapped all your lands normally. 5 mana. You tap 3 lands plus Cabal Stronghold. You make 4 mana from your swamps. Then you have 1 swamp left over. 5 mana, 5 mana. So you don't actually start making extra mana with Cabal Stronghold until you get up to 5 swamps on the battlefield. So if you have 5 swamps and Cabal Stronghold, then you're making 7 mana, which actually is a pretty sweet deal. And then it scales from there. You play another swamp. You're jumping up to 9 mana. And then 11 mana. So while this can make a lot of mana on turns 7, 8, 9, 10, it's not very explosive. It's going to take a long time to really get going and start doing crazy things and making tons of mana compared to Cabal Coffers. On the other hand, like we mentioned before, it is a lower opportunity cost because it enters untapped, it makes colorless mana, but I'm just not sure there's a deck that can make this work, especially considering the basic swamp restriction. Maybe if it was just any swamp, there would be some weird argument of it working in Modern. We do have Urborg as mentioned, but the fact that you gotta play basic swamps really limits the number of decks that it can actually fit in. As far as Standard is concerned, we do have like Dreadshade as a payoff, so maybe there's a chance there's a Swamp Matters deck, some sort of mono black deck, but still, it's not going to really do anything until the late game. So I feel like Cabal Stronghold is a cool card. I like the reference and the callback, but I expect that once we start playing with it, we'll find that it's actually not crazy powerful. It doesn't really work well with additional copies because it's not a swamp. There's very few tricks to break it like you can with Urborg and Cabal Coffers. I guess Urborg does kind of work. It turns all your other basic lands into basic swamps, so that's kind of helpful, but it still seems very challenging to build around and really harness the power of Cabal Stronghold. But if you're playing a deck that is all basic swamps and 4 Cabal Stronghold, and you're planning on getting to the late game, like you probably wouldn't want this in an aggro deck, but you're planning on getting to the late game and then using Torment of Hailfire, some big finisher like that, there could be a way to build around it, but it is a very stringent deck building restriction to actually make Cabal Stronghold work. Speaking of mono black and heavy black costs, we have Dreadshade, another member of the triple colored mana 3-drop cycle, and I think this card is actually pretty sweet. So 3 black mana, you get a 3/3, and then you have the Shade ability. Pay a black, gets +1/+1 until end of turn. You can dump all your Cabal Stronghold mana into it, just make it super huge. So one of the things that makes this card kind of appealing is a 3-mana 3/3 is actually a pretty good deal for black as it is. I look back through Magic, and I believe the only 3-mana 3/3 without some sort of drawback was Bloodchin Fanatic. So this is only the second no downside, all upside 3-mana 3/3 we've ever seen, which means it's already pretty much on curve. The big problem with Dreadshade, though, is the mana cost. Triple black means you pretty much have to be a mono-colored, only black mana deck, maybe with a very, very light splash, but you essentially need to be mono-black to make this work. We learned this with like Giralf's Messenger, another really powerful, similar card. If you're splashing an additional color of mana, you're going to be playing this on turn 5, turn 6, turn 7, and then it's just not nearly as powerful. There is a bit of good news, though. We already have the all-swamp deck in the standard format. It's not in the top tier, but mono-black aggro is a solid, somewhat competitive budget option, already playing exclusively black lands, so you're going to be casting your Dreadshade on curve 100% of the time, and then you have a great finisher. The upside of Dreadshade is it's very close to a 3/3 unblockable for 3. If you just attack first, leave up your mana, it's very challenging to actually block this card, because if your opponent blocks, you can just dump all your mana into pumping the Shade, probably killing the blocker, ruining their plans. So a lot of times what happens is your opponent and just doesn't block. So it gives you a great mana dump if you're playing like that mono black deck in Standard. Flooding out is a little less painful. You can get in huge attacks or stay back on defense and block some of the biggest creatures in Standard by dumping all your mana into it. So I actually think that Dreadshade is a very powerful card. I'm just not sure how many decks we will have in Standard that can actually take advantage of its power. Next on our list, we have an uncommon Tetsuko Yumezawa Fugitive, a 2-mana, 1/3 that makes it so creatures you control with power or toughness 1 or less can't be blocked. So Tetsuko Yumezawa itself is a 1/3 unblockable, which is fine. That's not a bad deal, especially if you can stick some auras on it or something like that. As far as Standard goes, probably the coolest card to make unblockable with Tetsuko is Combat Celebrant. Being able to exert it, get extra combat steps, kind of sweet. The problem with Combat Celebrant is that it's so easy to block and kill, but Tetsuko takes care of that problem. So kind of a fun build around idea there. Otherwise, remember you can also pump creatures after they've already attacked and been unblocked. So you do the sweet blue-red artifact deck with Ravenous Intruder. So you attack, it's got 1 power, then you sack a bunch of implements, prophetic prisms, kind of go to town, throw in a scrap trawler for reanimation or whatever. Just go to town and hit your opponent for 10 damage, 11 damage, 20 damage with a huge unblockable Ravenous Intruder. So we'll have to see. I think Tetsuko Yumezawa Fugitive is a cool build-around card. I don't know if it'll actually be good enough to see Standard play. Maybe like a one-of and Bogglesy type decks, it could be fine. A Danto Vanguard getting an unblockable damage, something like that. So I think there's like some potential, but I don't think it's insanely broken or anything like that, but certainly fun to build around. Staying in the world of blue cards, we have the blue member of the 3-drop cycle in Tempest Jin. 3 blue mana, you get a 0/4. It's got flying, but it gets +1/+0 for each basic island you control. So again, you need basic islands to be a payoff. If you curve out 1, 2, 3 islands, play Tempest Jin, you get a 3/4 flyer for 3 mana. That's not a bad deal. Grows along the course of the game. At first I thought, well, maybe this card is good. Then I remembered that we have Enigma Drake, and Enigma Drake is arguably an easier to grow in most decks, same mana cost, easier to cast version of Tempest Jin that doesn't require you to play all basic islands. Kind of like some of the other cards we were talking about, the basic part of this card really makes it a lot worse. Like, I could see an argument for this being modern playable if you could play a bunch of shock lands and fetch lands and still power it up, but the fact that they need to be basic islands really limits the kind of decks that this can go into. On the other hand, we have seen Enigma Drake be good. It's going to be harder to grow Tempest Jin into like a 10/4 on turn 5 or turn 6 by casting a bunch of cantrips. It scales much slower than Enigma Drake. You need to make all those land drops to make it happen. We could see, though, some sort of sweet mono blue control deck. We have a lot of good counter spells. We have Torrential Gearhulk. So maybe there's a way to just be strictly mono blue, counter all your stuff, and have Tempest Jin as one of your primary finishers. It is a fast clock in the air if you're making an island land drop, basic island land drop every turn. So maybe there's enough support to actually make it work. So I think we'll have to wait and see. I think this might be the worst member of the cycle, or my pick for worst member. The basic island restriction makes it really challenging to grow in most decks, restricts the deck you can play it in, even more so than some of the other ones, like the red one, the green one, even the black one. You don't gotta have basics to really make it work. You just gotta pay the tough converted mana cost. Tempest Jin needs exactly basics, and then it just scales pretty slowly. Even in its best case, it's just kind of a big flyer, and it's not that big that quickly. So we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully a sweet mono blue control deck develops. Otherwise, probably leaving Tempest Jin on the sidelines. Next on our list, we got Everhand Witness, and this is one of the sweetest, spiciest cards from the set. So for 6 mana, you get a 4/4 with lifelink, but it has the ability where you can pay for and exchange your life total with Evra's power. So kind of reminiscent a little bit of like a reverse Tree of Redemption, but there is way more power with Evra because Evra can actually attack. So take, for example, Fling. If you're at 20 life, you play your Evra, you exchange for 4 mana, so suddenly Evra has 20 power, you go down to to 4 life, a fling is just exactly lethal out of nowhere. So 2-card fling combo, and that doesn't even include less janky ways of going about it. Like, you don't need to fling if you can just make Evra unblockable. So Key to the City is a kind of forgotten card right now, but it has been playable at points in the past. We also have like Open into Wonder, Tricks of the Trade even. But if you can get down your Evra, use Key to the City, for example, to make it unblockable, attack, exchange life totals, you can potentially just one-shot your opponent, and even if your opponent somehow doesn't die to that, since you have lifelink, you're going to gain back all that life, and the end result is going to be you have a super huge Evra, like a 20 power Evra, and you're going to gain back all of your life, so you're going to also have 20 life, so you eliminate kind of the downside, the risk of the exchange. Of course, it is a risky plan. If your opponent can kill your Evra by reducing its power in response to your activation, so like Tragic Slip, for example, or Dismember, then all of a sudden, I think you just kill yourself. Maybe I'm misunderstanding the rule, but I believe that that is how it works. So while there's a lot of one-shot potential with flings, with unblockable effects, there's also the potential that you accidentally just one-shot yourself. Next up, we got a reprint uncommon, Gaia's Blessing. I mean, it's a cool, iconic reprint. They've done a great job with Dominaria, making it feel nostalgic and historic. I don't know if this card will actually be playable. Sorcery, speed, kinda pseudo graveyard hate that also draws you a card. It does cantrip, which lowers opportunity cost. It is worth noting that if you're gonna mill yourself out somehow, Gaia's Blessing is nice there. I don't know what deck we have in Standard that would want that, but it is a cool reprint nonetheless. Otherwise, Arcane Flight, very aggressively costed enchantment. 1 mana gives a creature +1/+1 in flying. Likely can find a home, potentially at least, in the blue-white Boggles deck. Adanto Vanguard, Sroms. It's just about as cheap as the effect can get. So if the Boggles deck remains a thing in Standard, this is a great way to trigger your Sroms, pump your Adanto Vanguards, give it flying to get in even more damage. Finally, our last uncommon for the day might be the sweetest of them all. Final Parting. So for 5 mana, you get to double tutor. 1 of the cards goes to your hand, the other goes to your graveyard. The first thing I thought of this is it's basically like an upgraded Jared's Orders. If you remember Jared's Orders, we used Jared's Orders in the Heartless Summoning budget deck in Modern. So you can tutor up 2 Mirror Retrievers, 1 goes to the graveyard, 1 goes to your hand. With Heartless Summoning, you can loop them infinitely. Final Parting basically does the same thing, but doesn't require us to add green mana, which for a budget deck is actually a really huge deal. And remember, the other huge upgrade with Final Parting, and the reason it's exciting, even though it's an extra mana compared to Jared's Orders, is you can search for any 2 cards, which opens up some really sweet jank in Standard. So you could tutor up a reanimation target like Razaketh, along with a reanimation spell like Yawgmoth's Vile Offering, Liliana Death's Majesty, and just do everything all at once. It's basically the Standard version of Gifts Ungiven from Burial Rites and Iona. You can kind of do the same thing with Final Parting. So very similar to that. It's sorcery speed, so your opponent gets to see it coming. But I think that this card actually has a lot of potential in reanimation decks, also in budget Heartless Summoning decks, but is super unique, very powerful uncommon to finish up the day. And those have been our daily Dominaria spoilers for today. So what do you think? How good is Multani? Is that card actually Standard playable? How big does it need to be for the Trampler to be worthwhile? Is Cabal Stronghold better than I give it credit for? It seems kind of unplayable to me, but maybe I'm missing something about it. How about Dreadshade? Can we find a black deck that can actually cast it and make it good, because it seems powerful? How about all the random commons and uncommons? Tezuko Yumizawa, what other combos are there for that? Gaia's Blessing reprint, Arcane Flight, Final Parting, Tempest Yin, is that better than it looks? Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.